Hi, I'm Erika, one of the senior curriculum managers here at Magoosh and a GMAT expert. Today, I'm here with 5 tips on avoiding an average GMAT score. Now, back in my tutoring days, these were some of my favorite things to share with students in our first sessions, so stay tuned to find out what they are. So before we jump into the tips, let's talk about what an average GMAT score really means. So an average test score is the 50th percentile. In other words, 50% of test takers are scoring below you and 50% of test takers are scoring above you. Now on the GMAT, that is a 565. So that means if you are scoring 570 and above, you are in that top half of test takers. If you are scoring 560 and below, you are in the bottom half of test takers. Now to get a little more specific, at the section level, an average verbal score is a 27, whereas an average quant score is a 40. So my first tip for avoiding an average GMAT score is to start early. Now, this may seem like kind of obvious advice, but it's really, really important that a lot of people don't want to think applies to them. So it's worth saying. Now, one of the keys to this test is familiarity, and that's with question types, with test structure, with strategies, with content, all of that. And the way that we develop that familiarity is with consistency, not cramming. So be sure to give yourself time to learn, to build good habits, and to make the sorts of improvements you want, or you may not be able to deliver on test day. My second tip for avoiding an average GMAT score is to take realistic practice tests. And the reason for that is that doing GMAT problems on their own and doing GMAT problems in the context of a full-length test are totally different experiences. Things like pacing, anxiety management, endurance, those are all things that don't necessarily come to the table in a standard practice session that will come to the table in a practice test. So I highly recommend taking a practice test every 2 to 4 weeks in order to make sure that the skills and strategies you're building in your practice sessions are actually going to be able to come to the table in that test setting. Now I recommend that pace because it's frequent enough to make sure you're getting in enough reps before your test day, but not so frequent that you're not able to improve between your tests. My third tip for avoiding an average GMAT score is to nail down your timing strategy. Now, this is something that taking practice tests can really help with. One of the things that I see really commonly with students who are coming in with below average GMAT scores is that their timing strategy is kind of a mess. In particular, they end up spending so much time with earlier questions that they're just dying to get right that they end up not having enough time to finish questions later in the section and end up not finishing them at all or having to rush click through them in order to get through the section. And this can tank your score. So it's really important to make sure that your timing strategy is locked in so that you're able to finish the section on time and give yourself a chance at that last group of questions. The biggest thing that I recommend here is accepting that you are going to miss questions on test day. That is how the test is designed. So trying to make sure that you are missing the questions that you want to miss. So that means the questions that you're going to take the most time on and that you're probably going to miss anyway, and not whatever questions appear at the end. Now, if you're surprised by the idea that you're supposed to miss questions on test day, I highly recommend you check out my video on how I got a 770 on the GMAT, where I talk about the importance of understanding how the test is scored, especially when it comes down to missed questions. My fourth tip for avoiding an average GMAT score is to practice with below average difficulty questions. And this is where a really good understanding of GMAT scoring can also come in handy, because this seems counterintuitive. If I'm aiming for an above average score, shouldn't I be practicing with above average questions? And the answer is yes, eventually. But because of the way the GMAT algorithm works, if you are missing questions at a below average difficulty, that's going to drag your entire difficulty on that section down so that you don't even see those questions at an above average difficulty. And as a result, your GMAT score is pulled down with your difficulty. So prioritize working on questions that you're getting wrong that are below that average difficulty level. Now, once you're getting those right with a pretty high frequency, then you can start focusing on those average level questions, and then you can move up to above average level questions. Now, important to note, as you start missing fewer and fewer below average difficulty questions and your difficulty in the sections rises, you will likely start missing more questions. But But that's actually a good thing. As long as the difficulty of those questions is rising, your score will rise as well. So don't focus on number of questions you're getting right. Focus on the difficulty of the questions you're getting wrong. And my fifth and final tip for avoiding an average GMAT score is to avoid careless errors. Now, this is super important because careless errors are the kinds of things that can cause us to miss average or below average difficulty questions, even if we're performing at an above average difficulty level in general. So careless errors are things like solving for X instead of Y, or picking insufficient when we actually get a definitive no in data sufficiency. So what can we do about that? Well, when we find ourselves making a careless error in our practice, instead of just saying, oh, that was careless, whatever, and kind of blowing it off, instead really focus on that sort of error, because that could be an easy win for you. So figure out a strategy for addressing that kind of error, for avoiding it in the future, and then focus on never making that same mistake again. And those are my 5 tips on avoiding an average GMAT score. Now, a couple of important questions. Do you need an above average GMAT score? Or is an above average GMAT score enough for you? If those are questions you don't know the answer to, I highly recommend checking out our video on average GMAT scores by school to help you figure out what the right score goal is for you and your school list. Let us know if this video helped you by liking, and subscribe for more videos from me and the other experts at Magoosh. And if you're looking for more resources on the GMAT, check out the links in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.